Okay, now we come to the last video, which is on how to answer 20 mark essays. Don't worry, now I'm only giving you a broad overview, right? For the next 2 weeks or so in tutorial, we'll also try to answer 20 mark questions together in class, as well as, of course, over the next 1.5 years. Okay, so don't worry, now we're just looking at the broad overview of how to answer 20 mark essays. Okay, so introduction. You must have an introduction for 20 mark essay. This is different from 12 mark essay. So 20 mark essay, you must have an introduction. What should be in the introduction? Firstly, define any key terms in the question if there are. And then next, in the introduction, you should outline the evaluation criteria that you are using in your essay. And where necessary, state your stand. So if the question requires you to take a stand, then you should take a stand. Evaluation criteria just means the criteria you will use to evaluate the relative importance, effectiveness, or influence of different factors, different theories, different impacts, different strategies. We will learn more about the specific evaluation criteria when I see you face to face in class, right? But now I just want to show you an example of an introduction. Okay, so let's say we have a question. Strategies to manage tropical deforestation are useless. To what extent do you agree with this statement? So in your introduction to this question, you need to first define the key term. So the key term in the question would be deforestation. Right, so first define what is deforestation, and then you need to very clearly state your stand. Okay, so for example, the stand is I do not agree that strategies to manage tropical deforestation are useless. So this is the stand, right? Other than setting the stand, of course, you need to also outline the criteria you will use for evaluation. Remember, we say that a 20 mark essay must be consistently evaluative. So in the introduction, you must be very clear about what your stand is and what the criteria for evaluation you are using would be. Okay, so for instance, in here I can say that, okay, I'm going to evaluate the strategies in terms of their impact, feasibility, and sustainability. So these are the three criterion that I'm using. Impact, feasibility, and sustainability to evaluate the strategies. And when I'm doing this evaluation, it helps me to see that not all strategies are useless, right? It shows that these strategies, though limited, are still useful in managing tropical deforestation. So that is my stand in this essay. Okay, so in the introduction, define the key term and then outline the criteria you use for evaluation. So, for example, in this question, I will evaluate the strategies in terms of impact, feasibility, and sustainability, and then state your stand, whether you agree with the statement or not. Okay, then we go on to the body. For 20 mark essay, the body should have 4 to 5 paragraphs. Usually 4 is enough. I only recommend 5 if you write very fast. If not, 4 is enough. You have about 40 minutes for a 20 mark essay. So I think it's about enough time for 4 body paragraphs. Okay, so for body paragraphs, you can use peel with extra E. So the extra E will be evaluate. Why do you have extra E to evaluate? Remember, we say that the 20 mark essay must be consistently evaluative. So in the introduction, you state your stand, you state the criteria you will use for evaluation, and then in the body, you need to start to evaluate each factor or each strategy. So I'll show you an example to illustrate what I'm trying to say. So given the same question, right, strategies to manage tropical deforestation are useless. To what extent do you agree with this statement? So this is an example of a body paragraph. So we start with P, point, right, point. So my point here is I'm going to look at the strategy of protected areas. And my point here is the point I'm making here is that these strategies are not useless, right? Protected areas can be useful in managing tropical deforestation. Then before I evaluate, I need to first explain how it works. So I explain how protected area works. Okay, you can read this on your own. If you need to, you can pause the video to read. Most of these are in your lecture notes. So here, basically, what I'm trying to explain is how protected areas can be used to manage and to reduce deforestation. Now, after you explain how it works, then you go on to evaluate the strategy and to provide examples to support your evaluation. So if I want to evaluate how effective or how useful protected areas are, I will evaluate using the criteria that I've outlined in my introduction. So just to recap, in the introduction, I said that I will evaluate my strategy in terms of impact, feasibility, and sustainability. Right? So I'll use the same criteria for my body paragraph. So I evaluate, so I say in terms of impact. So in terms of the impact, protected areas can be useful. Then provide specific examples to support your point. So I use the example of Brazil from 2003 to 2012, protected area increased from 28 to 47%, and as a result, deforestation rates fell to a historic low. Once again, you can pause if you need to read and you need to take notes. You can just pause the video. Okay, then you can also evaluate in terms of feasibility. So I say that protected areas are feasible, right? They are easy to implement in terms of cost because financially it's not too expensive to implement and enforce a protected area, right? You don't need a lot of very sophisticated infrastructure and so on. What you just need to do is to implement and then hire people to enforce protected areas. For example, hire police officers to catch illegal loggers and so on. So, but it's not too expensive, right? So therefore, this make protected areas a useful strategy to manage deforestation. So this is my evaluation. But of course, the evaluation, you should also look at the limitations of the strategy. So you can go on to look at the limitation of protected areas. So I use the third criterion that I've outlined, sustainability. So I say that in terms of sustainability, they may be protected areas may be limited in usefulness in the long run if there is a lack of political will. Okay, then provide an example. Okay, so this is an example to show how in certain situations, protected areas may not be as useful. Okay, so a good evaluation should consider both sides, right? How this strategy is effective, but also how this strategy may be limited in effectiveness and provide examples for each case. Okay, so here I'm using the same example of Brazil, just a different time period to illustrate my point about sustainability. So protected areas may not be useful in the long run if there is no continuous political will to enforce protected areas. Okay, then finally, you have the link back to the question. So link back to the question and link back to your stand. So my stand is that strategies to manage tropical deforestation are not useless, right? So I link back to the question in the stand and I say ultimately protected areas can be useful in managing tropical deforestation if there is political will and adequate enforcement. So ultimately it can still be useful under the conditions of political will and adequate enforcement. Okay, so you can see that in the body paragraph, there's a lot of evaluation going on, right? You should not be spending a lot of time explaining. You should be spending time evaluating how this strategy is effective and how it's limited, and then link back to your stand that is stated in the introduction. Okay, then we go on to the conclusion. Conclusion similarly is necessary for 20 mark essays. You must have a conclusion. It's not like 12 mark essays where you don't need a conclusion. In 20 mark essay, you must have a conclusion. Okay, so please leave sufficient time for a conclusion, right? If not, your essay will look something like this, right? Very good intro, very good body, and then at the end, you're just rushing off. And that will affect the overall quality of your essay because remember that the 20 mark essay must be consistently evaluative. So when you come to the conclusion should also have evaluation to sum up your entire essay. Okay, so what should be in a conclusion? You repeat your stand, reiterate your stand, provide overall evaluation, or you can add in some concluding remarks. So in the conclusion, there should be further evaluation of whatever you have said before to further justify your stand. Okay, conclusion should not be a repeat of introduction. So as I mentioned just now, allocate enough time, at least 5 minutes to write the conclusion. So example of a conclusion, right? So in conclusion, reiterate your stand. So in conclusion, strategies to manage tropical deforestation are not useless because the strategies have shown themselves to be feasible and effective in managing deforestation in specific contexts. Okay, so this one you have already talked about it in the body paragraph, but you can go on to add in some concluding remarks. So for example, To ensure that management of deforestation is sustainable, cooperation between stakeholders will be important, right? This one you may not have talked about it in the body paragraph, so you can bring it in as a concluding remark to further strengthen your essay, to show that strategies to manage deforestation can be useful if there is cooperation between stakeholders and if there is political will to enforce regulations. Okay, then you can elaborate a bit more on these conditions for the strategies to be useful, to be successful. Okay, so for example, here I say while developing countries may be keen to reap the instrumental value of forests to boost economic growth, they should recognize that only the sustainable use of forests can mitigate problems such as climate change and floods and ensure the survival and well being of communities in the long run. So here I'm making a concluding statement, right, to further my evaluation to say that it is important to manage tropical deforestation, and these strategies are useful if there is political will, and we should have political will. Okay, some of you may also realize that I bring in the instrumental value of forests. So instrumental value is something that you learn in theme 2, right? And this question, deforestation, is theme 1. So here you are showing evidence of synoptic thinking. You are linking from theme 1 to theme 2 when you bring in concepts such as the instrumental value of forests. Okay, so this is just a introduction to how to answer 20 mark questions, right? Don't worry, we will continue to look at 20 mark essay, 20 mark essays in class in tutorial when I see you face to face. I will also share sample essays with you. We'll also get you to write the full essay. Okay, so don't worry too much at this moment. Just make sure you understand what an introduction is, what a body paragraph requires, and what should be in the conclusion. Okay, so finally, just remember that a good 20 mark essay is consistently evaluative. So the stand and the evaluation criteria must be clearly stated in the introduction, and then you use your body and your conclusion to justify your stand and to build and to evaluate based on the criteria that you have outlined. Okay, we will definitely continue to learn more about how to evaluate in subsequent lessons and how to write the entire essay. Okay, so now what you need to do is just to complete a very short quiz, and that's it. And I look forward to seeing you next week in school finally.